All right, thanks for joining us, Brian. Do you want to just start off and just tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you grew up and what your childhood was like?
Yeah, and thanks, Rory, so much for hitting me up and doing this chat. Um, yeah, growing up, I grew up outside the city in Connecticut, and when I was young, I really loved to draw. So, for whatever reason, I was drawn to expressing myself in that way. I have stacks of binders, stacks of these notebooks. And I would draw like, Disney characters and Marvel, like superheroes, and that was like a big part of my childhood. And as I got older, I got into sports a bit more, but always was connected to the arts in one way or another. So would always be taking the art class, going to this art camp, painting, drawing, that kind of stuff, hands-on medium. And then later on in high school, I started to make like short films with my friends and my family. And it started with kind of all kinds of crazy ideas, like inspired by things I saw on MTV or like a mock music video or something with hockey. And I, that's really where I learned to teach myself how to edit. So I think I was using this program, some sort of Windows media software. I forget what it was exactly. And a couple of my friends knew how to edit. I didn't think much of it, but I remember getting into it very early on at that stage and just being so excited about creating like a montage or putting a few sequences together and seeing that just come alive in a different way. And what was started out as drawing kind of started to morph into ex- this sort of creative expression through video, but it's nothing that I ever thought about in a professional sense or in a career, with a career mindset. It was just all for fun. I think all throughout my childhood too and growing up, I would watch movies, like watch a ton of movies. I'd go to the movies and come back and want to watch another movie just to keep that like feeling alive, like the suspension of disbelief, and get that the thrill. Try to keep it going as long as possible, and watch movies late at night with my dad, and it's something that we did forever. So I established a love for movies very very early on, and stayed with me until this day. I think slowly but surely, I kind of am developing just an interest in the arts, an interest in cinema without even realizing it, just doing these things for fun. I went to, when I started college, I studied history and government because it's something that I was just genuinely interested in. I didn't think of film as a career. I didn't apply to film school. I was like, I'm doing the academics and not necessarily thinking about the next step that early on. But it was my, I think it was winter break of my freshman year, and I'm browsing the web, it's kind of floating around, and I stumble on this course at NYU. It's like the fundamentals of filmmaking, and this kind of bell went off in my head. Immediately, I got to sign up for this. This sounds so cool. So I signed up, and summer came around. Took the train into the city to do this class, and I absolutely just loved it. We're running around the city, making these short films, shooting it on 16 millimeter, cutting it, actually cutting it old school, splicing it together, taping the film reels, watching them in class, and it was just an unbelievable thrill. And then we're studying films and looking at them, looking at the films we make in the class with our classmates, but also studying, a lot more of the classic films and interpreting movies in a different way than I ever had before, looking at them through the filmmaker's eye. And how was this made, and why was it done this way, and how does it make you feel? All these things, and it really broadened my perspective on cinema and just genuinely excited me in a way that I didn't consider, didn't even try to make that happen. It just did organically. And I was like, this is something that I want to do in some capacity for my career. Like I knew it almost immediately then. Over the next few years throughout college, I still studied history, but I would always be involved in a film project, doing my own film project in the summers, interning, uh, and PAing on set in different productions, and slowly starting to build a network through people I knew or people I met in the class, um, and kind of taking it from there. Those were the earliest days.
Do you remember like early on, like when you were just like a young child, like watching movies, like what kind of movies were there? And then like you said, when you started watching other movies when you were in, was it college or like older? Like what kind of like progression of movies were there like throughout your life?
Yeah, I mean, the early days, we would watch kind of everything, like a few that stood out to me. Back to the Future is one that I loved. I loved the whole trilogy. I remember from the earliest age that one really resonated. And something about, it's the storytelling, the imagery, and the fantasy of it. Particularly love that film. But everything from, let me think, from, Gladiator to Born Identity, a lot of the popular movies of the era, maybe a little action focused. Woody Allen films, Spielberg. Yeah, so I think nothing in the early days call out as really, especially filmmakery films, but just ones that were connected to pop culture, popular at the time, uh, interesting movies.
Was the like a history class where you watched them, and then like was there a particular film you watched when you thought, oh, I could do that, like I want to do that as a career?
I don't know if it was a particular film that stood out that made me want to do it as a career, but I think just something throughout the class made me feel that it just feels so excited about the medium and put it into a context where this could be something that I'm associated with daily and working with and working around. That's what got me excited. The fact that uh, this isn't something that I can only experience when watching it on the screen, but I can be in and around all the time. That was really the mind shift that happened. Uh, and I think just as I've gotten older, as the years have gone by, I've really looked at film through through the lens of a filmmaker, and I've done a lot more research on what kind of movies I'm drawn to and what kind of techniques that I can pull from and things that inspire me. And I look to movies for entertainment, but also for a film education and for film history.
And then once you had that like inspiration of like I want to do more of this, like how did you kind of build yourself up to like start doing your own projects? Like was it music videos first? Like what was the first kind of projects that you worked on?
Yeah, so I did a few different things simultaneously. Uh, in the early days, I PA'd on. I'm from Connecticut, so there was a feature film shooting in Connecticut, and somehow I got on it as a PA, and so just worked on set in that capacity. I interned with a production house in Brooklyn, and I worked on set on a few commercials as a PA. So doing production assistant work, but somewhere along the lines, somebody told me, if you want to be a director, then you need to go out and shoot your own stuff. Like nobody's going to hire you to be a director because you happen to like movies or know a lot about film or be in it. And that sunk up with me. It's like, okay, time to go start shooting stuff on my own. And I didn't know a lot about cameras and a lot about the equipment, but I did know how to edit. So the earliest projects that I did on my own were hip hop videos. I had a friend who was a rapper, or a friend of a friend who was a rapper, and he connected me, and I shot a video for him. Then I did another video for him, and before I knew it, his kind of local community of musicians and hip hop artists all started reaching out to me, and in this very kind of like small community in Connecticut, uh, was getting all these requests to shoot music videos, and it was foreign to me. And I remember getting these texts, and it was snowballing, and I didn't really know how to handle it. I was like, but I thought it was cool, so I started taking these requests and started shooting more and more of these videos. And all of a sudden, I had a reel of hip hop videos, and that was really the first kind of body of work that I had as I started to enter into kind of the real world after school.
So for these videos, what was like the budget's like kind of a few $100s, like you didn't really have much to kind of play with in terms of like what you want to do? How did you kind of come up with concepts and ideas that would be affordable, I guess?
Yeah. So I don't know if there was actually any budgets at all. If anything, it was transportation, maybe a meal, but I would scrape together somehow enough money to rent a camera, and I would go on location, go to the neighborhood that these artists live, and the neighborhoods alone had this kind of feeling and texture and atmosphere that was exciting to me because it felt very organic and cool. So the early videos are really just capturing an energy and creating a cool cadence with the edit, and maybe hiring a few other characters or extras. Remember the first video we did, the artist had a friend who was this awesome basketball player, so we had him like doing these dunks in the background, and we shot on a basketball court. So there's always some little element or twist, but it was mostly just these feels pieces that had this kind of more organic, kinetic energy that came out of the performance, came out of the location. And what I realized I was learning on the fly was making the decisions for composition and lighting, and where am I going to put the subject in relationship to the background, and how am I going to move the camera. Yeah, actually, I just remember one of the early tricks I would use is I would go to the drugstore, like the pharmacy, and I would rent a wheelchair. They had two wheelchairs, and I was able to rent it out for like 25 bucks. And that became my dolly. I think I had heard about filmmakers doing that. So I would bring a friend with me, and he would pull me in the wheelchair, and I would hold the camera. And all of a sudden now I have these kind of more dynamic shots that are moving across the basketball court and wherever we were. And yeah, basically had a dolly there. So stuff like that, learning little tricks and getting a feel for what works and what doesn't.
And so when you were doing these music videos, were you watching other music videos and kind of getting inspired and kind of looking at the styles and trying to follow what other people were doing and trying to explore like the whole, like in terms of the genre, like figuring out, okay, what do these people want? And then were the artists also having their own ideas, and like how would you kind of navigate if their idea was kind of, you know, a bit out there, like in terms of like reining it in, like, I want explosions and all this, like, oh, we don't have the budget for that, you know?
Yeah. So I had a few friends at school, and they had a kind of a few mentors. So I was paying attention to music videos in this guerrilla filmmaking New York City style. I wasn't really tapping into anything larger beyond that. So that became my inspiration. I would see how they pulled off these shots. I would see kind of how they approached it. And, you know, maybe at the time, looking back, I think maybe my point of view was a bit narrow with that, but I was drawing inspiration from the people around me who were doing a similar approach. And then as far as working with some of these artists, most of the time at that level, because I was willing to come on board at virtually no cost, I had plenty of free reign. They were just happy to have the video and happy to, yeah, have a music video produced. But yeah, sometimes there were some kind of wackier ideas that I I don't really remember negotiating with them as much as just shoot. I just kept shooting, and all of a sudden the day's done, and the idea somehow just floats away.
How did you go from like shooting these smaller budget music videos then to starting to get paid like more, or at least getting some budgets, and then maybe working with a bigger crew, like hiring a DP, or like trying to, you know, progress to those bigger budget music videos?
It's kind of a slow grind for me. Like at the same time I'm working on these music videos, I'm also um, interning and working with this director Hellman Curtis as an editor, and I'm also working at Forbes magazine shooting and editing for them. So I had my hands in a lot of things in the early days, and actually was making a living in film. And ultimately, shooting music videos ended up taking up less of my time, and I was just hustling on all fronts in film production. But slowly but surely started to build a reel, and it came to the point where I felt that I had done some interesting projects, but I didn't have a music video that actually reflected my sensibility. Forget music. I didn't have a piece of work that reflected my sensibility as an artist and the things that I wanted to continue to shoot and put into my work with a bit more soul and a bit more heart, a bit more personal to me. And so I made a decision to go out and try to kind of level up and do my next project in a way that would feel bigger and more personal and end up, ultimately trying to help the career grow. Because like I said, I had this body of work, but there wasn't that much of a consistency within it, and there wasn't that much of a voice threading the pieces. I got into a situation where I was shooting for everybody because I just enjoyed the hustle. But I needed to reel it in a bit and do something that felt a bit more like it, yeah, like I said, like it reflected me. So anyway, I connected with this artist online. His name's Dylan Owen. We're still very close, and his music I felt was a bit more in line with the kind of things that I wanted to shoot. And together we ended up shooting this project. It was called There's More to Life. We did a few others that I actually, again, didn't really make any money on it, but I flew in the one DP that I knew from LA. He owned a red, and we shot upstate New York for a whole weekend and ended up making this awesome little film. It wasn't a music video as much as a film for his album. And this piece for me ended up getting a lot of traction and a lot of attention. People really responded to it in a way that I hadn't experienced yet in my career. And yeah, people would reach out, and I won some competitions online. I got recognition at film festivals, and like I said, it was really the first piece that, looking back, I consider myself to have moved from somebody who was producing, directing, editing, shooting, doing it all, to being a director with a vision and putting forth kind of like a mission statement. This is the direction that I want to go as a filmmaker.
Yeah. So, and then once you started getting more projects, like, was there like a shift towards commercial work, or did that come later?
Yeah, that was a little bit later. So now that I have this piece and some other supporting pieces of work, shop them around, I ended up picking up a rep for music videos and connecting with the music video production company and pitching in a more formal way and learning how to pitch. So up to this point, every project I had was something that I somehow generated through my network or from myself. And at this point, I now am getting in briefs from the record labels and being asked to put together a treatment in response to that brief in hopes of getting the video. And that in itself was, again, one of the first steps into being a professional director and learning how to formulate ideas that fit for a particular need, for a particular artist, within the constraints of a budget and a timeline and a location. And just started to develop my skills for pitching and coming up with ideas quickly, and coming up with ideas that may not, maybe the track that I get in with the brief doesn't totally sync up with what my natural instinct is, and finding creative solutions to fit that. So I ended up booking more jobs through this format and building the reel in that way, and slowly but surely building up a reel of some really nice music video work with some cool artists that have had a lot of exposure.
Yeah. So do you want to just talk a little bit about like the treatment process? Like, what is a treatment, and like what goes into it, and like how do you like formulate ideas, and like do you use reference pictures, or like how does it all work?
Yeah. So for music videos, usually a quick turnaround. The commercials, you have a bit more time. Music videos, you get it in, you have a couple days, everything's moving so fast. So you have to come up with the ideas pretty quickly. And oftentimes, especially in the early days, I would almost think too hard about it. Like there was some problem or puzzle that I needed to solve, and there was some sort of right answer, which there's not. It took me a lot of kind of stabs at this process to figure out my own creative process, my own creative kind of pattern as far as generating ideas. In commercials, it's already sort of built out when it comes to you, but in music videos, it can be as open-ended as anything goes, or maybe there's just one sentence that the artist has a limited amount of time, so you need to work within this time frame. So it's really open ended, and for me, I learned that just collecting a body of reference images over time when you're not in the pitching process is really helpful to then pull from when you do have a pitch come in. So you're inspired by things from different films or photography or advertisements, and you've got this body of references. I'll save on my phone. I have all kinds of libraries online that I pull from. And then you start putting the pieces together of things that you like that sort of fit the mood of the song, and you give it some time and you relax, and organically a thread may come through the things that are naturally interesting you that you can weave into the treatment or almost back into this music video concept. And so the treatment usually is, or at least for me, very image heavy. I do as much as I can to paint the vision for what we're actually going to be shooting in the references. So I may have one page for a scene, and the entire page is references that are very close to how I see us being able to shoot it, from the color palette to the composition to the overall, texture and feel of it, and the subjects within the references ideally closely reflect the subject that you're shooting. And in a perfect world, you look at the treatment, you look at the end video, and what you put down is pretty close to what you ended up with. And that's not always the case, and it's okay if it's not, because there's a natural evolution that's going to take place throughout the process. But the intention is to get it a full vision as you see it on paper beforehand.
So like when you first started doing your music video treatments, like how did you figure out like what is a treatment? Did somebody kind of walk you through the process? Like did you see some other examples of treatments to be like, oh, that's what it is? Like, and then in terms of like the structure, like how did you structure it? Like do you write like thanks for considering, and then the look and feel, and then how did you kind of go throughout the treatment?
My early treatments were just totally off the mark. I didn't have any references. I didn't know what to do. I remember I reached out to a label, I think it was Columbia, and I said, hey, this is the work that I have. Can I pitch on something? And they said, sure, cool work. You can pitch on this project that was coming up. And I remember I just put together a Word document. I didn't know that I needed images. I didn't know that there was a structure to it. And here's my pitch. And it was just way too long, and it didn't really fit the need. And I didn't know this at the time, but I sort of caught on pretty quickly. And I reached out to a few people I know and said, well, what do your treatments look like? Do you mind sharing them? And I would reach out to a director or two that I admired and have these kind of conversations. So quickly, I updated my approach, and I've really been updating it since, and trying to finesse it and trying to play to people's sensibilities and the amount of time people have. And sections are really good to have. Try to maybe start with a summary and then go into the look and feel, maybe highlight a specific approach that you're going with, and then break down the specific scenes or specific performance setups, and you walk through them and try to do it especially music videos, as succinctly as possible, because they're reading through so many. In commercials, you're only going to be bidding against two other directors, and you want to cover off on as much as you can to help sell your idea. But with music videos, you really just need to catch the attention of the artist and the label quickly. And I think images really help do that. But it's important to be concise but clear with what your main selling point is. So if there's a particular technique you're using, or a particular narrative that you're sticking to, or maybe it's a location or some sort of trick, highlighting that and giving them something to latch onto, saying, okay, this is the treatment that has this thing. It's going to set it apart against the rest. So I find myself now making sure that I don't write too much, because I feel like I may lose their attention. I think it's good to cover off on everything, but again, you need to kind of play to your audience. And commissioners at the label, they're not only working on the video that you're pitching on, they're working on videos for numerous artists, all kinds of different projects. So being mindful of their time, but being effective in how you communicate is really the goal. And like I said, I've been honing this approach since, and constantly am trying to figure out ways to do it better, do it more efficient, do it more clearly.
Yeah, I talked to a guy, Henry Hobson, and he mentioned he makes ripomatics. Do you know what a ripomatic is?
No. It's like a moving storyboard or?
It's basically you take references or you take like scenes from other movies and you like cut it all together, and then you kind of have like this feeling of like the idea that you want to make. So it's like a trailer basically, but using The Matrix and then Die Hard, and then there's like all these little scenes. So it's like, oh, okay. So some people like go to that much effort to try and say put across what they're trying to do, but it's kind of like maybe a little unrealistic if you're like showing these crazy scenes. But at least it's like an idea to get like the feeling across.
I think if you have a specific vision and these references in film that relate to it directly, I think it's a pretty good idea. I've heard of that approach before, and I've heard of it being successful. I didn't know that that was the name of it, but I think it's a cool one if definitively the perfect reference for it. Because I imagine you may get pigeonholed if it's kind of a looser visual reference, but it's that clear to view.
Yeah, because like I know, the website I'm talking about is called We Direct Music Videos, and they had like a whole page with all these treatments from like the 90s, and like some of them were just like, because the director was pretty big, it was just like a paragraph of like, this is what I'm going to do, and then they're like, so sure. But then there's other ones that go into super detail, and that's what they're trying to like, for whatever reason they took them all down, so it says the page doesn't exist anymore. So I'm like, oh,
Oh,
wonder
they took
why.
them down. Yeah, I was familiar with that site, and I remember reading Treatment by Spike Jones. It was from the 90s, and it was one page. Couldn't have been more than 7 sentences, but it was abundantly clear what the approach was, and also, doing something like that displays a level of confidence in what you're pitching to. I know it was a different era. Treatments didn't look the same, but still, there's something to be said for an approach like that, where this is what I'm doing, and
Because at the end of the day, the pitch is just about winning the job. So like all these directors put in so much effort and time into making these like incredible treatments, but a lot of the times it's like they don't win. So it's like, how do you like invest? Like, did you do a lot of pitches that kind of didn't happen? Like, how did you get over that? Like, putting all this time and effort into something that you never get to do. Like, how do you accept that?
no, I have so many folders of treatments that have gone nowhere, and some I think were really good, and some looking back weren't so good. But I think just over time, you keep doing them, you become much more efficient at your creative decision making. So now I can do a treatment much faster than I used to, and it takes me. Uh, it's I'm much more confident and quick to understand if something I'm pitching is going to work, if it's clicking, if it's making sense, and where the references are that I want to use for that sort of thing. Like I said, the early days, I used to think so hard, like there was a specific answer. And now it's become more of a flow from the subconscious. I'll respond to it instinctually and say, okay, this will be cool and this will be cool. And I know now from experience, I could tie these scenes together in this way and this will all fit for the budget. Jot it down quickly and start pulling references, and then I'll edit edit what I've written. But I don't hold it as preciously anymore. I'll take what I'm really feeling, put it on paper, and I'll get it out. As far as music videos go, because I know the level of competition that could be going out to 10, 15 other directors. And if you hold it so closely, you're inevitably going to be experiencing that kind of that come down disappointment if you don't get picked. And now this thing that you've spent all this time dreaming up, may never get made.
Like, how do you know that they're not just going to steal your ideas and somebody else makes it? I'm sure there's been cases where they do an amazing treatment and then you see it online, it's like exactly the same. It's like they just got some other director to make your treatment.
Yeah, that's something. Yeah, I haven't worried about too much. I think I've seen that, heard about it, from time to time, but you just have to hope that everyone's working with some level of creative integrity, and that doesn't happen. But a lot of the ideas that we come up with in general are taken from someplace, somewhere else. to start with. So there is a level of flexibility that needs to be accepted within using creative ideas. But yeah, you know, if it's a direct replica from something that was involved in the same pitch, yeah, that's not ideal. But I haven't seen that often.
Yeah, it's kind of like a stand-up comedian. If they start stealing jokes, it kind of gets noticed, and then they finally get called out eventually. Like, you can't keep just stealing people's work. But like, I think the whole process of like music videos is kind of, you know, very competitive, but it's also like, you know, you're doing all this work for free. It's like there's got to be a point where they start, you know, paying you to pitch. But I guess that's how they keep it open to everyone.
Yeah, and that's also how it's good for younger filmmakers to break in, because you know, it levels the playing field a bit. If the pitch is going out to a lot of different directors, it gives the chance for somebody who may not have the reel but has this really innovative idea to break through and get selected and be able to work on a project they otherwise, you know, wouldn't have had access to. So, but yeah, that is a point of discussion amongst directors. You know, it's a lot of free work without the return. But like I said, the other end of that does give people the opportunity to break in and get exposure to projects that they otherwise, yeah, wouldn't be able to. There's only a select group of directors that were getting paid to do treatments.
So what was the first kind of big music video that you did a treatment for and you won?
Yeah, so the first one that I won the job, well, there were two that I sort of won the job, but I wasn't really pitching against anybody else, but it was through the label system. But the first one that I won against other directors was this job for Steve Martin and his band, the Steve Canyon Rangers. And I remember getting this in. It was newly through the production company that I started working with, and I thought it was pretty cool. Like, this is a gig for Steve Martin. Wow, I can't believe I'm getting, you know, a chance at it. And I remember I was taking the train into the city, and I didn't think too much about this one. I just got it all down on paper. I think it was like an hour and a half. I'm working on my laptop, putting these references together and putting the treatment together. It was a pretty short treatment. And the one note in the brief is that Steve doesn't have a lot of time. He's on tour right now with Martin Short, and you know, they're going across the country doing their shows. So we're gonna have to film him on the road. So come up with an idea that can exist within, you know, only need Steve for an hour and a half or 2 hours. So I think it's actually pretty clever. I led with that, and I said, okay, well, why don't we shoot Steve on green screen, and we'll be able to invest our time and resources into creating the world and post-production and not bog Steve down during the production itself. We'll be able to go through our scenes quickly and get him in and out, and then again put it on post. And I ended up getting the job, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh, holy cow, the system actually worked. I got a pitch in, I put together an idea that I thought was pretty succinct, and it was complete, and they picked me. So from there, we ended up meeting Steve on the road. He was in Minneapolis, and he was doing the show, went to the show the night before, met Steve backstage, all pretty surreal for a young director. And he's like, okay, looking forward to tomorrow. The next day, we do the shoot, just so incredibly professional. And for me, I hadn't shot anything with this level of talent ever. And I also hadn't shot anything with comedy, and it had a comedy side to it. But I knew that if I stuck to kind of the realism of the approach, and I kept it simple and didn't do too much, kept Steve in the frame and made sure everything followed the storyboards that I put forth, I'd be in good shape. And the shoot was successful, such a great experience. And out of that, he ended up calling Bill Hader and Cecily Strong of SNL to also be in the video and fill out this narrative component that was written into the idea. We knew we were going to do two shoots, one with Steve and then one with actors, and we're going to do them at two separate times. So after that, I found myself on the phone again, this new filmmaker with Steve Martin, Bill Hader, Cecily Strong, and just one of their assistants. And I'm just kind of sticking to my guns, walking through the vision. They were all just so professional and so fun to work with. And it was just a really great experience for me to basically learn how to be a director in this kind of situation where time is limited. You're dealing with people who are extremely, uh, obviously competent at what they're doing. And, I don't want to really get in the way of their performance and be mindful of their time that I'm asking them to be on screen and the amount of takes that I'm doing. And uh, it was just a great growing experience as a filmmaker. And the project ended up being, really big success in my first kind of music video that I won. And I ended up using this piece to continue to get work from that point on. In a way, it sort of validated me, not to myself as much, but to the people I was pitching for and the people surrounding me as a legitimate director.
Yeah, so were there jobs like this you mentioned before that you weren't like competing with others, that you kind of like built yourself up like in terms of experience? Or was Steve the first kind of celebrity, big artist that you worked with?
Yeah. So, yeah, funny enough, before that, I had worked with a few pretty big hip hop artists too. I had worked with Soldier Boy and worked with Big Sean. And those pieces again started to help support the reel and got me familiar with working with talent that weren't just kind of indie artists, but those were also, I generated those projects on my own throughout a formal process. I ended up meeting Soldier Boy in LA, and it was this very kind of guerrilla style. We connected and we shot it in a couple hours. And same sort of thing with Big Sean, that ended up being more of a documentary project, but it wasn't a really formal, as formal of a shoot, as formal of a process. So I think Steve was the first one that followed the traditional filmmaking path from inception all the way through to release.
Yeah, because like I know working with celebrities, like even when the budgets do get super high, you still only have like 1 or 2 hours and they never have enough time. And so you always have to battle to kind of figure out a way to kind of make the film that you want to make. That's why you see a lot of, like actors or other people, so you can focus on making something like, or silhouettes, or like, the even face replacements nowadays where they replace the face because the celebrity just doesn't have time to film, or they don't want to film, or like they kind of just, you have to kind of fight to try and make something worthwhile. So yeah, I think figuring out like, okay, I've only got an hour with the guy, like let's film it on a green screen, or let's kind of figure out another way that we can kind of tell the story. Is that kind of what you've found like through doing the next couple of projects, or were there more time? Like how long kind of do you have for, like, if it's a bigger kind of star, like what kind of projects did you work off after Steve?
Well, I think it's just, that project and the subsequent ones, they all force you to be a better filmmaker, better director. And being a good director in that sense is knowing the shots you need to tell the story at a bare minimum. So you at least got to get those. And then after you get those, you can start to get, you could start to get more details and start to play around a bit more. But going in, having that plan, being like, if I don't get this, we don't have a piece. Like I need this. So prioritizing the shots and then matching that against the amount of time that you have. And even if you do have a lot of time with an artist, you don't want to burn them out. And unless you're really not getting something, the performance isn't coming through, there's something wrong. I like to try to move as fast as I can so we can move on to the next thing and get another shot that's going to complement the one that I just did. So managing the clock is always the job of, the time is always the enemy of the film project, and being able to manage that and knowing what you need and the kind of shots you need to be successful is really important. And through each project, you become a little bit better at doing that. Maybe I'll switch to this lens from this setup and we'll save time. I could shoot two things from this point of view, and understanding how to create these like efficiencies and solutions in terms of the craft and in terms of maybe a more technical approach.
Yeah, because I'm just looking on your Vimeo. So the Soldier Boy was kind of early on, and the the cinematographer's Patrick Lawler. Was that the guy, your friend with the red?
Yep, that was my friend with the red. And I had met him a few years earlier when I was working with the director, Hillman Curtis. He had worked with him and I had stayed in touch with him. So I went to LA. I had contact with Soldier Boy and I called up Pat, again, my only cinematographer friend. I would have called him anyway because he's great. But at the time, he was my only cinematographer friend, and he had a red, and he's really, really an expert at the red technology and has been since. And I was like, hey, you want to shoot the Soldier Boy video? And he's like, absolutely. So we ended up connecting in LA, and Soldier Boy, I was talking to him through his manager. He said, we want to shoot it at my house. So we went to Soldier Boy's house. And then when we parked outside Soldier Boy, he changed his mind. Like, okay, I don't want to shoot at my house anymore. And I was like, oh shoot. But fortunately, the day before, I had scouted out some studios because I thought maybe, it'd be good to have a second location. So I'm outside of Soldier Boy's house. I haven't met him yet, but I call up the studio that I had visited the day before. I go, hey, are you open today? Is anybody shooting today? He's like, no, it's available for the afternoon. I'm like, great. We're going to book it. And so myself, Pat, and we were with one other. Pat had an AC with him. We drove down to the studio. We started to get set up. And then I didn't even know if Soldier Boy was going to show up. I didn't know. It was kind of a shot in the dark. But he did. And again, this was one of those shorter shoots over a couple hours. We ended up shooting that video.
Yeah, so it all worked out. That's good. And then, so you've also worked with a bunch of like female artists, and was that kind of more like what you were trying to like aim for? Or was that just kind of the jobs that you got picked for?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I started to shy away from hip hop because I know it's like a lot of artists work with the directors that they're friends with or that are in their circle. And I found that getting through on bigger hip hop jobs through the label system, through the system that I was working within, became a bit more challenging. And I did want to expand the scope of work that I was doing and and the kind of talent that I was working with. So I was like, I need to go beyond hip hop. And I did, and ended up working with different pop artists, indie artists, all kinds of really talented musicians in different genres.
I don't know if you want to talk about the commercials yet. Like, when was the first commercial? Like, was it the Uzi Vert Guess thing? Was that the first one that you worked on?
So Uzi Vert wasn't, but it was a nice natural transition from music into commercial world. I think that was last summer. And I worked on that one with my music video production team. So there was kind of a natural overlap with hip hop and music and commercial. So my first introduction into commercials was through an opportunity with Polestar. And that happened, I think it was 2020. So kind of we're into the pandemic. And this opportunity to shoot for Polestar came through my relationship with Forbes. And they had this partnership, and I ended up coming on board this project. And it was such a great opportunity to kind of change gears for me and move from music videos into commercial space with this new car, this really fresh product that didn't really have kind of a visual profile yet. And took that opportunity to really lean into this project and make it feel like I was able to put my stamp on it as a filmmaker and visually give it a twist. So it doesn't feel like a traditional auto spot, but it has this level of personality that was sort of born out of my music video sensibility and the style and the technique that I had developed over the years in music videos. Putting that into this car commercial was my goal, and I think something that has resonated since. And because we shot it in New York in the earlier days of the pandemic. There were so many restrictions and so many hurdles to get past to be able to execute this. But on the other end of it, the roads in Manhattan were as empty as they've ever been. So we were able to get these kind of very cool shots and sort of steal them that in a way that otherwise would not have been possible if it weren't for when we were shooting. So it's kind of like a blessing in disguise being able to have access to a project like that at that point in time. And then that kicked off my interest in pursuing automotive commercials, and realized what a natural fit it was for me to take my kind of visual sensibility and apply it to this medium.
Which one was first? There's like Live Clean, and then another one is
Yeah, that one was
Miracles.
first.
Did you shoot that on like anamorphic lenses? This is like lens flares across the screen.
Yeah, yeah. We actually shot them both on anamorphics. I think it may come through more in that one, but in the one we shot in New York, it's a bit more subtle. But yeah, we also shot that one anamorphic.
Is that something you like to go towards, or like was that the DP's decision to say like let's shoot on anamorphics, or like what's the decision there?
Yeah, I think the DP on that one suggested it, and I thought it was a great idea because I had shot on those lenses before, the Hawk and V lights. I'd shot a few of the music videos on them, and it just they produce such a beautiful image, and it's a way to add, I think, a level of scope and style to a piece that didn't have all the resources in the world, but we were able to invest in these lenses that were fantastic. I think anytime you shoot anamorphic, it captures the world in a way that, the lens is now interpreting reality and stylizing it in a very interesting way. And to put that against a vehicle that is new and fresh, and taking the location of New York City, but presenting it in kind of this moodier new look, was the goal. And I think those lenses really achieved that.
So what was like you mentioned Forbes through, were you still working for Forbes and they had this project, or did you like make it bigger than it was meant to be? Like they wanted to do like a little branded piece for Forbes or something, and you said, oh, let's make a whole commercial. Like how did that whole process work?
The goal was not what you see on my site. The goal was these kind of smaller deliverables, branded pieces for Forbes.com. And I saw this as such an opportunity to put my stamp on a project that has the potential to have a bigger impact than the smaller deliverables that were required. So we ended up nailing these smaller deliverables and making it, hitting the client needs, but also really investing our time and resources and energy. The DP, the whole team really was excited about making this piece bigger than the ask was. So this was one of those opportunities where I saw this kind of gem within the project, and it was our goal to pull that out and realize it to its fullest potential. And I think we did, and I'm really glad that we went the extra mile. And I think the crew, especially the DP, worked. We just worked overtime. We worked beyond kind of the scope of the ask and tried to pull it off and make it something special.
Yeah, it looks great. I mean, because you always see those kind of like dealership type commercials where they don't put any effort in, and it's just like, come on down. So it's like, okay, let's elevate it to something more than just a used car salesman type pitch. But how did you go from like Polestar and then like Alfa Romeo, like BMW? Like did you have briefs come across your desk, or like did you pitch for those ones? Like how did those kind of the next projects come about?
So I hadn't yet gotten myself really into the commercial world, and I had this Polestar piece and I had some music videos. I ended up getting connected with an EP at Paramount who was in charge of producing this spot for BMW. And it was an interesting dialogue. Again, this wasn't the traditional ad agency to reps to production company route. This was BMW to Paramount, who worked as sort of a production house and an agency to directors. So the EP at Paramount reached out to me and probably a few other directors and asked me to pitch for BMW. And yeah, I put together a pitch that I thought was really good. I felt really strong about it. And it was this Polestar piece that they were really gravitated towards, they told me. So they selected me to do it. They were looking for somewhat of a similar style and somewhat of a kind of the Polestar piece is refined, but it has a mood. So accomplishing both those at the same time. And the BMW car was electric, Polestar was electric vehicle. So there was a nice overlap in the one piece of work I had with the BMW opportunity. So I ended up getting selected for it. And and that was the real, after Polestar, pulling that spot off was what helped kind of establish me in the automotive world and started kind of getting the ball rolling.
What was that project like?
Yeah, so that one was, again, had a celebrity talent. Keke Palmer's been on screen since she was a little kid. She had a record deal and she's an actress, and she's really done it all. And she was partnered with BMW. Now, I think perhaps some of my music video background also supported me getting that job too. So this is where I'm shooting a car, but I'm also shooting a celebrity, and figuring out how to manage the time once again, and making sure I'm getting all the shots and making sure I'm featuring the product enough, telling the story of Keke, but also telling the story of the vehicle. Those were the challenges. And I put into the treatment that I thought it'd be really cool if Keke was surrounded by butterflies, because I thought butterfly was a really nice metaphor for BMW's transition into the electric world. It was sort of like this metamorphosis concept I loosely wanted to tie to this story. And I also just thought it looked great and had this fashion element. So we ended up hiring this woman in Los Angeles who manages all kinds of different animals, like animals and bugs and creatures. And she had basically a small farm of butterflies that she brings to shoots. And I didn't want to do this in CG, wanted to do it practically. So we had, kind of took this ambitious leap of, like I said, capturing the celebrity Keke, capturing the vehicle, but now adding this element of butterflies to a couple of the shots. And it was a lot of fun. It turned out great. And we've got these fashion moments that pair with the vehicle, and we try to create this dialogue between Keke and car.
Yeah, so I guess like like you said, the music video stuff, like they probably saw that you're used to working with like celebrities or like musicians and in the studio and managing the time and getting the job done. So yeah, I guess there's like a crossover, and it's like you said, making like the best of the opportunity. So when you had like the Forbes Polestar one, it's like you take that opportunity to elevate to the next level. Same with like music videos as well. It's like you start off small, but then you build up over time, and you kind of have, I guess, like the idea, like, because you're only as good as your last project, but it's like, how can I make this project better so that I can get the next project? And like everything's always like building upon like what you've done in the past, so that you can kind of show what you can potentially do in the future.
Exactly. And that's been my mantra. It's just built, one step at a time, building. You do a project, you share that project if you're proud of it, and then you try to get the next one based off of that or based on your previous projects. And ideally, you're constantly putting one step in front of the other with the work.
From those commercials, how did you get to the Alfa Romeo one? What was the story behind that one?
Coming off the back of the BMW project, I was just excited to keep the momentum going, and I came into this Alfa Romeo pitch with so much confidence and so much more experience now with shooting vehicles and being able to capture them in this very dynamic way. And I hadn't yet shot with FPV drone on an automotive spot. And for this one, I wanted to incorporate a new tool. So I brought in an FPV drone team, and we shot it on the coast in New England, close to where I grew up. So that helped kind of this chemistry between the car and the location. And yeah, and the client was very receptive to a lot of the kind of cinematic touches that I wanted to put into the piece. And for that particular project, we ended up shooting, the ask was to shoot one hero spot and 3 separate campaigns for the holidays. So there's one for Halloween, one for Thanksgiving, and one for Christmas. So again, coming back to one of the points that we were discussing earlier, it was really important for me to know what shots I needed in order for each one of those pieces to be successful, and how to recreate a very similar location to look like three different holidays, in addition to shooting different scenes for a hero spot. So it's being very clever as a filmmaker and very kind of precise in the planning, so you don't waste any time and you're getting what you need for the client. But I'm also walking away with the piece, the hero spot, which was most important to me, uh, and making sure that that can really exist on its own without feeling incomplete.
And then you mentioned the BMW with Victor Cruz. Was that like an NFL player? Like, what was that all about?
Yeah, so Victor Cruz also partnered with BMW. That was that came off the back of the Kiki project. He's former NFL uh, Pro Bowler, and now he's commentator and in kind of an influencer. So that one was shooting in New York, and again, I I leaned into the technique of transitions, and I wanted to pair Victor as an athlete to the vehicles, to the way I captured the vehicle. So Victor, extremely capable, athletic, dynamic person, personality, but also on the field. So weaving the edit and weaving the shots in and out of his daily routine with the vehicles was the goal. And I I thought the technique of transitions was really the most appropriate filmmaking tool to help communicate that idea. So we basically we walk through Victor's day, and he's using these different, driving these different BMWs depending on what's happening in his routine, and leaning into the pace of it, the movement, and kind of the elegance of the piece was the goal there. And that was a really exciting shoot because we got to shoot in and around the city again with the celebrity talent and these beautiful vehicles.
So you still doing like music videos as well as commercials? Are you like shifting more towards trying to aim to do more car commercials, or depending on the projects, like how are you spending most of your time these days, and what are you like aiming for?
Yeah, so now it's really leaning into the commercials, leaning into the automotive spots, and building that side of things a bit more than music videos. From time to time, I'll pitch on a music video if I think it's a cool opportunity, or if it's an artist that I really like, or if there's something that's getting me excited about the particular project. But the majority of time now is less music videos, more commercials, and then uh, and within commercials, focusing more on the automotive. And for me, it's automotive plus people. It's not just shooting the vehicles and the sheet metal and kind of the features of the car, but creating some level of narrative around what I'm shooting, and ideally, yeah, like I said, incorporating people, introducing level of humanity or level of fashion or celebrity, and somehow building this dialogue between vehicle and subject and character, and interweaving them in a way where the subject is reflecting the qualities of the vehicle and the vehicle is reflecting the qualities of the subject. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there to tell stories in a very exciting way.
And do you have any like future aspirations for like a feature film one day, or short films, or like what are your goals for the future?
Yeah, so beyond commercials, um, I've written a short. I need to do a few more drafts of it, but eventually I will shoot it. And it'd be great to get a narrative short going. It's been a while since I've done one, but I think focusing on the commercials is definitely the next uh, is is the short term goal. But I don't want to ever shy away from narrative work either, and I think it's important because that's really what got me excited about the industry to start with, or films and movies. So I'll eventually shoot this short that I'm writing, and see where that goes, and continue to do passion projects that are not necessarily tied to any client or artist or anything like that. I think it's important that I allocate time to do that and make that part of the routine.
So how are you going after like the commercial like automotive world? Like, do you have like an agent, or like are you reaching out to brands, or companies, or like thinking about like how to get the next job? Like what is your like process there?
Yeah, that's something I spend, a lot of my time on. I have a core production group that I work with, but I also have a handful of reps and relationships with producers around the country who are now putting me up for jobs, and I'll reach out and say, what do you have coming up? I I won't really reach out to brands directly unless there's something specific that is really exciting me about that. But leaning into the relationships with the reps and production companies has been kind of the path to getting work at the moment, and making sure that my work is being seen by by reps and the people that have exposure to the ad agencies. So I have relationships with some of the ad agencies as well, and I'll make sure that, again, that my I think it's important as a filmmaker. It's not something that you really get taught, but it's essential that you share your work and you stay top of mind and make sure that the people who you want to be working with know what you're up to and know that you're excited about the opportunity to collaborate. So maintaining relationships and building upon them and sharing the work is really the approach for getting the work into.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of like agency, I guess, that kind of attach themselves to the brand. So a lot of the brands or the manufacturers kind of trust the agencies to funnel their work. It's very rare that you work directly with the manufacturer. But I've seen like in like the UK, a lot of them, like they'll work for McLaren directly and Bentley and like all, because they're all the UK places. So I guess the budgets are coming down, and it's easier just to hire somebody, like just to shoot them a short little thing. But I don't know, I think it's a bit different in America in terms of like the manufacturer side of it.
I think that that kind of work, if it is directly from the brand, often is more, covering a live event or showcasing the vehicle in a bit more of a coverage way than kind of a more curated storytelling, advertising approach, which is what I'm trying to continue to work within. So there have been times in the past where I've shot I've shot the car. Maybe they have the car in the city and they need, some footage of it by Central Park or something, and I've done that, but it doesn't necessarily amount to something I want to put on the reel because it doesn't have that extra element of narrative or storytelling or kind of thought behind it.
Yeah, it's like you don't have the big machine of like the crew and everything to build it out. Like you just have, I guess, just a camera and a car. It's a bit harder to make something.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a bit more like the early days, as I was mentioning with the music videos, where uh, it's it's a little bit more. You have to be more resourceful.
To finish up, like, thanks so much for joining us, Brian. You've given us some great advice, but as like a end thought in terms of somebody who wants to get into commercial filmmaking, maybe music videos, get towards the car commercials, what kind of advice can you give them?
I think it's just go out. The same advice that I mentioned earlier was given to me. If you want to be a director or cinematographer, just go out and start shooting things that are interesting to you and try to make them a complete thought and represent you in some way, and put together a few pieces of work, and all of a sudden you'll have a body of work that you can shop around. And the internet is kind of endless with the opportunities or with the access you have. So once you have that work, you can put in a lot of time to getting it seen and taking meetings and pushing it to get more work. So that's the formula that I've used: is make work, show it, try to get more work, and just keep building from there.